shifting focus for our last session, where we're going to explore your questions that you've submitted throughout the day with some fellow panelists. Before we do that, just a quick shout out, it's your last chance to explore the hub, visit the different partners and sponsors for the event, and a big sort of thank you to our key sponsors around the event of AMS and UKG and Microsoft. And as I said, we're now going to wrap it up with a panel discussion, and we've got two people that joined me earlier today, and they're back for more, and they're back for more because you guys have just submitted such great questions throughout the day, so we knew we had to cover more. We've got Mara back from HP, who's still at the beach. I'm very, very happy to say. Hopefully we can all kind of sit back in the sun quite soon. And we've got Max back as well from Personio, and so great to have you join me today and explore the questions that have been coming in. So I've been writing down lots of different questions, so we might jump around a little bit, but I thought it'd be really good to cover kind of the themes that's been coming in on chat, and also some questions that perhaps came up in your own presentations that we didn't get a chance to cover. The theme is, it's all eyes on HR at the moment. I keep hearing this kind of statement. I also hear that HR teams feel very overwhelmed, perhaps burnt out. They really had to, it was all on during the pandemic, and they haven't really had much of a chance to sort of catch up on their own well-being. And now they've got to focus on the well-being across the organization. So I wanted to sort of get your ideas first around this concept. Is this moment when we're talking about people first cultures in organization, and that people, I looked on the LinkedIn the other day, and some of the biggest roles of 2022 and 2023 were HR roles. So HR roles are growing. There's more people professionals. So does this represent a big opportunity for the HR kind of industry and profession, or is it actually a burden? So kind of what's your thoughts? Mara, would you like to lead with your thoughts on opportunity or burden? What's your thoughts?
In my opinion, opportunities, but I am an optimistic by heart. So, and I would say, as I was starting as well my presentation this morning, I really felt that HR was literally on every single business meetings, right? Whatever it is about changing the benefits because of the pandemic, whatever it is changing the teleworker policy, HR was there, changing cafeteria, workplace, and all type of changes were happening thanks to HR as well. So for me, it's really thanks to all the people that are here in this call, right, that contributed to develop further new policies in the organization, further new ways of working as well, right? Because I think hybrid work is a great thing, but behind this, in order to make this shift, required a lot of work, not only from a legal framework perspective, and every country in EMEA has a specifics, right? So I think I'm suffering a lot of this aspect because I'm responsible for the whole EMEA, and of course my manager is from US, and sometimes it's like, it's easy, right? But there are 38 countries in EMEA to evaluate and understand the legal framework in each of them. So I would say this is definitely the reality. For me, it's a big opportunity, and I think HR managed to jump on that opportunity. So for me, has been one of the precious opportunity where we had our voice heard in many, many cases. So for me, positive side of it.
Excellent, thank you. And Max, what's your thoughts?
I would agree that it's an opportunity, but let me just take the other side really quickly, just so we can kind of further unpack this and talk about how it could be a burden. I think this is very contextual and it's not applicable to all organizations, of course. So I think during this time, we're kind of at a very critical inflection point. And we've heard a lot about, HR now has a seat at the executive table. And I think that that's true for some organizations, for some enlightened organizations. This is very true, but it's not the rule. And I think that maybe there's even some folks in this room that are kind of struggling with this right now of gaining that seat and still fighting for it, even though the opportunity that enlightened organizations have taken advantage of to bring to the table their HR people. I mean, even in the news recently, we saw that Disney recently hired a new head of HR that reports directly to the CEO, which I think is an amazing development. That's very smart. And there are plenty of organizations, though, it's a burden when you don't have the organizational capacity to listen to HR. So it's kind of like being set up to fail because you're not going to be heard in the first place, or that it's too symbolic and not actually happening in a practical sense. So I think that in some cases, it can be a burden because the organization is not allowing for HR to take advantage of the opportunity that Mara's talking about, because I think that that is a huge piece right there, is that you have to have the organizational willingness and capacity to take advantage of the opportunity. Otherwise, it can very quickly turn into a burden.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. So I think it's a good example, isn't it, of the complex world in which we now live, where there's a great opportunity from what could be the burden itself. So it's sort of they go hand in hand. I think I would add that part of it, and Mara, you're kind of talking about this as well, is we have to be ready to evolve our own ways of working to be able to take these opportunities. And I think that in itself can feel like a burden, but can also be really exciting. But unless we're conscious that, because I'm really kind of aware now that essentially we're redesigning the operating model of whole organizations, and this means redesigning the operating model of HR, because we represent the processes, the systems, the ways of working of organizations. So the two go hand in hand, which I think can feel quite scary for some people, but as you said, it really we've never been in such an interesting position where we can truly have great conversations at that executive level, and for someone that's been in HR for a long time, that it's good to see that happen. But with that definitely comes the pressure. So we've been talking a lot about well-being, learning, digital skills, capability, talent, all these big hot topics. And so I wanted to explore a few of them and sort of just keep picking up on the questions that came in today. So Mara, let's start with you, where there's you talked a lot about hashtag HP proud, and we had a lot of interest about Me Day, and I've had another question come up just then about it, and I also saw from other presentations there's a sort of a growing awareness that any kind of hybrid strategy or solution goes hand in hand with a well-being strategy and solution. Can you talk a little bit more about that and share your thoughts on that one?
Sure. I think I totally agree with this approach. And I think hybrid means also that we need to find also new ways of bringing teams together, new ways of collaboration as well. Because if you think everything was happening right in the office before, right? Collaborations, meeting, and it was somehow easy to predict also the employees' expectation, right? They were somehow similar and they were somehow predictable because they were everything was happening in the office, as I was saying. So for me, the key things is really to secure that we do have the right tools and resources to push our employees and our managers to find new ways of collaboration, new ways of working together, and find opportunities to come to the office when there is a meaningful reason. And I'm saying this because I am normally in phone conference every day, and I have a team that is located in every different locations. And I come to the Milan office where I'm based, mainly when there are particular face-to-face events. So it doesn't make sense for me to come to the office to stay in a meeting rooms practically, because I'm talking about confidential things. I cannot stay in the open space. And so I'm going to the office when there are some good reasons to have interactions and collaborations and offsite meeting, even some fun activities, right? I think I'm not scared to mention that we need those initiatives in order to create an engaging environment as well. So that's for me how I do see the future of work as well, so that we are coming to the office when there is a good reason to come, and we are instrumental as a manager to create a cool environment to work, right?
Yeah, definitely. I keep saying that we've never really defined why we come to the office or what work is in the past. It was just that you went to the office, and in before COVID, there was you asked for some flexibility, or there was some kind of flexible policy, but now we have to redefine what the office means, or how you work, and these are just huge, complex questions that is very exciting, but also just brand new in terms of how we look at the workplace. Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to come back, Mara, because of course everyone wants to know about May Day, so I'll come back to that one. But Max, can I, one question that came in when you were speaking, and also it sort of relates to this, is how do you measure the employee experience, or what's your tips around measuring the employee experience? Because if we lead on from what Mara's just saying, is that the employee experience is changing, and also there's different ways of it being created. So what's your thoughts around how we measure this and understand impact and understand how to track things, those kind of concepts?
It's super interesting, because I think that there's this very tenuous balance of like how you collect from different data sources. So there's the idea of you have your people analytics function where you're kind of generating these reports and you're looking at things like attrition rate, you're looking at regretted leavers, you might be looking at all these different statistical kind of features and reporting. But you also need to collect your anecdotal data from your people, your qualitative data, to then color in that quantitative data. So I think I talked about that during my initial talk, but I think taking it one step further, in order to measure it best, I think the easiest way and the most tangible way is to look at it through the employee life cycle, right? To look at it from attraction, onboarding, development, retention, separation, and everything else. I think that's the easiest way to look at it, to basically look at each stage, maybe focusing in right now, for our example, on onboarding, basically. So looking at onboarding and thinking about what are going to be our 3 KPIs, key performance indicators, about what is going to tell us whether or not we're doing onboarding as part of the employee experience correctly. So easy ones there are things like early turnover. We could be looking at even simple adoption rates of things like, if we're using an HR software to kind of have people sign their documents, or submit things like their passport scans, anything like that, digital file management. If we're looking at that, then we might want to see adoption rates or completion rates to understand if we're actually delivering the best experience possible. But I think if we're going to get to the heart of it, it needs to be seen through those lenses of each stage of the employee experience, because it's really hard to look at employee experience as like a thing unto itself. We need to break it down a little bit into bite-sized chunks to better understand, are we succeeding in each stage, and where are we winning, and where are we struggling, and where are we losing? And those 3 things, if we can kind of put each stage from an organizational perspective into any of those 3 buckets, we can actually start to make better improvements, but it needs to be done through, and it doesn't have to be a lot. You could pick 3 to 4 KPIs. You could pick 2 KPIs really, and just focus in on the things that matter the most in terms of engagement or retention, and then determine if in those stages you're actually actively succeeding.
Yeah, definitely. Really great examples. And I kind of talk about how you want to map that kind of journey or cycle up, and then it's like a kind of dashboard, isn't it? What's working, as you said, what's not, where's the pain points, because it's not about constantly upgrading everything at once. It's about being very strategic about where you spend your time and why, and also knowing when to kind of get rid of things. So what do you maintain, what do you release, but what do you get rid of? And I think HR perhaps need to definitely take that one on board as well. You know, we've got to kill things just as much as release things, and know how to maintain them over time. So great. Thanks so much, Max. That's really insightful. And we've had a shout out of such an interesting point of view. Thank you so much. So Mara, you're not going to get it off without giving more information about the Mead Day again. So if that's okay, you could say a few words on that.
Sure.
And then I'll ask a question that leads a little bit off from what Max was just saying.
Sure. So it was actually one day that was given for free, like a paid leave, to the entire employees workforce across the globe. So it was an opportunity really to be disconnect, which was, again, I know it's a simple things, right? It's only one day, but it was more to push employees to disconnect from the office, because of course we were facing the opposite situation, right? So HP, during the pandemic, as you can imagine, everyone had to buy laptop, working from home, and buying printers for their kids and so on. So the business grew up significantly, but at the same time, the natural effect was a tremendous workload from every one of us. So the company really decided that in addition to give one extra bonus to the entire population of HP, which was a kind of a nice gift that was given by the CEO, actually they provided one day off really to secure that people can take care of their family and can somehow relax at least for a day.
Excellent, thank you. I've heard sometimes heard it called Bad Hair Day, or Stay Under the Duvet Day, that kind of thing. Yeah, so Sit on the Sofa Day. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. So what we'll do is let's sort of just move it around, and I'll come back to you, Mara, about the next one. So Max, one thing that came out of, I think it was the first day of the conference, and it was relating then to a lot that what you're been speaking about today. But it was this question of whether we actually have a bit of a learning problem in our organizations that we're not really quite clear about, because it was Trolls speaking from Lego Group, and Lego Group, they've got this amazing engagement, they've an amazing brand, everything, you know, in terms of data and on paper, you know, looks fantastic. But then he said, once I kind of dig into it, there's a lot of people saying that I'm not, you know, that career development is missing, you know, I'm not getting what I really need. And then he looked a bit further and he realized there was a lot of passivity around learning and people not feeling like they've got enough time, or they're not kind of curious enough. And then we started to talk about how HR teams themselves aren't feeling able to learn and be curious. And, you know, joining a day like today is a really big ask, you know, how do I take out this time? So what's your thoughts? Is this hypothesis, is it right? Do we need to investigate more? What's some of your thoughts about, do we have a learning problem that we don't actually know about?
It's a great question. I think it really uncovers the fact that in the studies that we've run at Personio, one of the things that I noted, I think I mentioned this in my previous keynote, but one of the largest deltas between HR managers' reading of their organization and employees' reading of their organization, their shared perception, the biggest delta, the biggest difference is actually in development opportunities. Employees don't believe that development opportunities are as strong as HR managers and line managers believe that their development opportunities are. So there's an immediate cognitive dissonance between what we are rating as really good development opportunities, like development budgets, mandatory training programs, anything like that, and what employees rate as significant feedback development opportunities. So I think that initially this is a much bigger ask, of course, but there's something that a recent head of learning and development was talking to me about, and it's like, having a development program, really you have to run it like a pick and mix candy situation. You have to have this universe of options that people can self-select from. Of course, that means you need to have the time to build out that program, but you really need to have a tailored, especially as we look at, you know, we're in this very unique moment of, I think it's 4 generations currently in the workforce together in some way, shape, or form. We have Generation Alpha entering the workforce at an increasing clip. There are many different people who need many different development opportunities and have very many different learning styles. So as much as possible, we need to deliver a universe of options for them whilst embedding a culture of development. And so there's two massive projects there that we can undertake, but that's kind of to say that the data currently tells us that it's broken, and so we need to fix it or break it even more and break it open entirely and say, let's forget about everything we've thought about employee development, and let's ditch the budgets, and let's think about how we can maybe make this even more of a self-selection process for people in org.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. And I do think there's a theme around breaking the rule book a little bit and letting go of these, because if you think about the tradition of learning and development in organizations, it's been very programmatic. It's been very kind of traditionally top down, and we use these terms of sheep dip. Everyone goes through the same learning. But on the flip side, as Mara's been talking about, the world of work has fundamentally changed. We're online. It's all going, and well-being is really important. So how do we start to break down the old ways of accessing learning, I suppose. So really good things. But I think what you're talking about there is that there's a mindset shift in organizations that I know Daniela from Siemens was talking about that earlier. And she's like, well, we've got a long way to go to create the mindset that it's good to learn, even though we've created this great sort of online learning opportunity. Yeah. Great. Excellent. Thank you. So just so you do know, Mara and Max, we've had more definitions of Me Day offered. So there's Thank You Day, and another company's called it Recharge Days, and they get 4 throughout the year. So there you go. There's lots of initiatives around that. So wanted to kind of continue on the focus of how do we collect, how do we use these data and these insights that you've been talking about, tracking the employee experience, understanding, as you're pointing out, Max, what the data is saying about learning compared to what we think is happening with learning, and use that into the next question for you, Mara, which is linked to one that came up when you were talking, and I thought we could kind of connect it together. So when you talked about some of the initiatives, one of them was having 50% of female leaders as a target. And the question was, what data do you use to inform an initiative like that? Is it something that you can achieve, or is it aspirational? And do you know how to go about it because of that data? And I think that would be a nice one to use as a case study that sort of relates to what we've been talking about, how you use data to sort of form initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Let's say that this is part of the entire sustainability plan, right? So it's part of other bunch of initiatives really focused to keep our planet even better, right? And I would say related to the female hiring in general, I think we need, in my opinion, we need to have a holistic approach in how we manage that, because from a hiring perspective, we are doing a pretty good job in hiring females. So the reality is that in terms of female hiring, our statistic looks pretty good. The challenge is really how to keep motivated our female talents when they are part of the company, maybe after they go on maternity leave, maybe after they had some years into the company and they want to have a career progression. For example, one of the studies that I think is pretty well known is also that normally women tend to apply for a role as soon as they have 100% of the skills that are labeled into the job description, which is pretty true that the number of female applicants that we got is very limited comparing to the male applicants. So we do have a lot of proactive and headhunting activities from my team, specifically on female hiring. So also the sourcing technique can be also very different. And I would say the other things that we are trying to do is also to have a role model in the company that can be sharing their experience, right, as a working mom, as leaders in the organization, and sharing their career progression. And I think those kind of examples, to me, are the real cases that we need to share to the external audience. I think sometimes I feel also that the salary negotiation is another aspect that female needs to learn as well. I can tell you I've been having so many interviews in my life, and Max, don't hear to that, but 99% of the people asking and negotiating about the salary were male and not female. And I think this is something that I would like to encourage all the female here to really secure that they can have those meaningful conversation in their organization as well, right? So for me, this is an example of how we are trying to achieve certain goals, but also, as I said, we need to tackle this aspect not only when we are hiring and acquiring talents, but to make sure that we are having the right learning path, the right training, as we said before, the right career progression. They want to have a meaningful job. We need to secure that they can keep this progression as well into the organization.
Excellent, thank you. So yeah, I think it's as you said, it's not a one size or just one solution. It's multiple solutions that you've got to kind of keep testing and iterating and building on. And I suppose this goes to the heart of topics like EDI. The equity component, that people need to have the same access to opportunity just as much as representation and a voice in the room. So really great. So Max, sort of just kind of feeding off that, actually, there's lots of talks about sustainability, and it's interesting how it has lots of different components. And some questions have come up today around how do you essentially sort of operationalize topics like sustainability into the employee experience. And so I wrote down some of the examples they said, how do you include it in things like career development, talent retention, EVP? So what's some of your thoughts around how you take some of these topics that seem pretty massive and, mindset changing and all this kind of stuff, and move that into kind of an I suppose more the employee journey in some ways, isn't it? In terms of those stages, yeah.
First, I think the business case is clear that we should be doing this, right? I think that we look at studies into what motivates new generations of workers like Generation Z, and purpose at work is the one that comes up the most. And purpose is mostly tied back to those big existential topics of sustainability, environmentalism, gender equity and equality and things like that. I mean, as Mara was talking, it reminded me, basically, Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, was asked why his cabinet was gender balanced, and his reply was because it's 2015. And as a Canadian, that warms my heart. But it's been 8 years since that, and we still have a lot of work to do in general. And I think the same applies for sustainability. So basically, the first thing you want to avoid, obviously, in terms of like EVP and employer branding, is greenwashing, because the numbers bear it out as well that most of the time younger generations can also quickly, call nonsense on this sort of thing. They can see it for what it is. So first, you want to make sure that you're maintaining a high standard of honesty, but at the same time, there's lots you can do across the entire employee experience to operationalize it. You can have employee resource groups dedicated to sustainability for in-office practices, making sure that there's all that stuff in terms of making sure your recycling programs are strong. But I think even back to the Me Day concept, if we tie it all the way back there, there's also the opportunity, a lot of organizations utilizing the idea of climate strike days. When strikes are occurring in cities, Fridays for Future and things like that, giving them basically a day off to do that. Because if you believe that there is social impact in what you're doing, you deserve not to be expected at work that day. You can go out and you can make a statement, and it can be about sustainability. It can be about anything, basically, but you should be allowed to do that, to have a voice, because ultimately that is a huge pathway toward engagement in employees, and ultimately more engaged employees are more productive employees. So you need to give them the opportunity to express their lived experience and their convictions in order to see their best working results. There is a direct red thread to those two things, not only in terms of retention, but just baseline employee performance. When they feel that their company is a values fit, they're more likely to work harder and work better for that company. It's so important in general. So I think it talks back to sustainability, but a whole host of topics, really.
Fantastic, and really nice call out, because the business case is there, but don't go and make it up, basically. Don't greenwash your way through it. It's got to be real. And so, that therefore it's all about experimentation, small stage testing, use the data, get some evidence, and then start to build solutions out from there. Great. Excellent. So again, we've had so much chat and discussions, but we're going to have to kind of call it a day. But thank you so much, Mara and Max, for coming back and joining me. I really appreciate it, and dialing in from different parts of the world. It's been really fantastic and really insightful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks to you. Thanks,
Thank
Max.
you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Excellent. So that's a wrap for day 3 at Barcelona. I am hoping there's still some sun outside that I can kind of enjoy until before the day is over. Thanks for joining us online today. It's been fantastic. Your kind of comments, your questions, your engagement online has just been overwhelming. We really, really enjoyed having you online, sharing all these great case studies, learning with you, and sharing all those great insights. I think before we go, we need to give a big shout out to the Teneo team that have made these 3 days such a huge success. And I'm going to not be able to name everybody, but a few names that are directly in front of my face because they're all online with me is a big shout out to Matt, Reno, Michael, Greg, Sunam. It's just been fabulous to work with you all, and thank you to all the Teneo team. Thank you for supporting me, and together we've had a great time. So see you all later. Make sure you come back to the HRcoreLAB in 2024. It's going to be even bigger and better. Have a great day.